Hello Penguinauts, I'm the Beardy Penguin and welcome back to Kerbal Space Program Endurance. This has been coming out relatively regularly, Beardy. What's going on? Are you ill or something? No, well, after my end of semester exams finished, I've had a fair bit of free time, and I've also just been really enjoying actually recording Endurance. So yeah, sort of massively got back into Kerbal Space Program. I seem to sort of go through phases of not really being interested and then suddenly renewing my interest because I discover something new to do. You know, it sort of waxes and wanes. I find a lot of other KSP YouTubers feel a similar sort of thing, but right now I'm way more into KSP and been playing a hell of a lot more than I have been in quite a long time, just because of all the interesting projects we're doing in Endurance, and just the fact that I haven't actually seen anyone else do what I'm planning to do in this series on YouTube before, or even at all. Probably because it's such a monumental undertaking to actually travel to another star system and colonize it in career mode with the sort of difficulty settings that we're playing around with. But anyway, today we are rejoining our Phaethon asteroid redirect mission, and as you see, we are finally rendezvousing with that fateful asteroid, which we are going to be renaming to Eos, which is one of the mythological steeds that pulled Helios' sun chariot across the sky. So, rendezvousing with asteroids is a bit of a pain. It's a lot more of a pain when you're launching from a body that is tidally locked, because you can't wait until, you know, Solitude rotates and so then you can launch into the correct inclination. We had to launch into a polar orbit last episode, which is actually the first time we've ever sent anything into a polar orbit around Solitude, which is a little weird. We've never actually sent one into a polar orbit before, probably because there is no like poles biome. There really aren't that many biomes on most of the bodies in After Kerbin, which is fair enough, to be fair. I think it makes a little more sense to just have the planets be worth a bit more science-wise, but have a few less biomes on each of the planets. You can like do most of the tech tree in the base game just from science from Minmus and the Moon, and I think that's a little bit, yeah, it's a little bit broken. I think it makes much more sense to have to actually explore all of the planets to complete that tech tree. I think we're going to be hard pressed to complete it with just how much science some of the late game techs actually take. But here we are. We've rendezvoused with the asteroid. We're just renaming it to Eos here, and we've begun mining it for its heavenly goods, and we're going to begin converting all that ore into fuel, and we should be able to reduce the mass of the asteroid from well over 100 tons all the way down to about 14 tons. That's going to make our job of pushing this out to the wasteland a hell of a lot easier, and we should get our 2 million funds in another episode or two when it's when our transfer window actually rolls around and we can actually head out there. We're also going to send another probe with it. It's not just going to be Phaethon heading out to the wasteland, because we want to do some resource prospecting on and around the wasteland, see if it's worth setting up some kind of colony on Malice and establishing some kind of permanent presence in that system. It might be something worth doing once we get our once we have our blueprint for how to actually do it after we've built a colony on Nemesis. So I don't know if you guys remember Echo. This is a space probe we launched towards Reaper, the new name for Jool, about half a series ago. I remember being worried that we might have finished the tech tree by the time this actually got there, but that was without taking into account A, the difficulty setting we're on, and B, just how expensive some of the KSP Interstellar techs actually are. So it's going to take a lot longer before we complete that thing, and especially with how much money, how many funds those damn techs take to actually, you know, research the parts. But anyway, it's now arrived at Reaper, and so we are going to explore the various moons. We have actually got a rover in that, you can't really see it right now because we're plotting a maneuver node, to get ourselves an encounter with Valiant, which should actually save us about a kilometre per second delta V, and actually reduce our velocity, bring us into a lower orbit. But yeah, that large fairing at the top with the heat shield, there's actually a rover in there. And my initial intention was to drop that rover onto the surface of Reaper. Beardy, what you're on about, it's a gas giant. It actually isn't. Over the, well, billions of years since we originally saw Jool, the atmosphere has thinned to reveal a solid surface. Yes, Jool is actually a super, I guess a super Kerbin? Yeah, like a super Earth. It is a massive rocky planet with a thick atmosphere. It actually has a surface, which I just think is great. And when we actually lower our orbit, we begin skimming along across the surface, we will actually get a reasonably decent view of the surface features. And it has a lot of surface biomes, which is kind of cruel, because it's not like we're ever going to be able to send Kerbals down there. Well, I mean, technically we could, but they would probably turn into goop by the time they touch the surface and never return. I think the surface gravity is nearly 3 Gs. That's not enough to crush them, but that's enough to be very painful for extended periods of time. And yeah, that atmosphere is, I think it's 90 kilometers high, and also just really, really thick. The reason I was only planning to send the rover there is I didn't realize just how much velocity it would have to lose if it entered that atmosphere. It'd be entering the atmosphere at about 11 kilometers a second. And a single heat shield is nowhere near enough to actually get through that. We would need 3 heat shields stacked on top of each other to actually manage it. And when I got here and realised the kind of speeds we're going at and just how thick that atmosphere is, now that we've, actually taken some scientific readings, yeah, no, not going to happen. But it doesn't matter because, there are actually 2 moons of Reaper that actually have atmospheres, so we'll be exploring one of them. So the first that we're visiting here is Valiant. And from the name, you can probably guess this is what has happened to Val. This is the current state of that old icy moon, which hung about, I think it was the 2nd moon out. No, it's the 3rd moon out from Jool originally. It was the outermost sort of large moon before you went into Bop and Pole territory. So yeah, it used to be covered by ice and have no atmosphere whatsoever, but since then the ice has melted and it has a very thin but actually temporarily breathable atmosphere. So it has got a very thin oxygen atmosphere. So this whole time while I was exploring the system, I was thinking of how in future we're going to send a manned Reaper. I was about to say Reaper 5, Reaper 4 mission. Yeah, Reaper's missing a moon. There are only 4, and we'll find out later on in the episode what actually happened to one of them and which ones are actually still here. But yeah, as you see, we're just descending towards Valiant, getting a rather beautiful view of this still rather icy world, but now relatively habitable world, which is pretty interesting. It's actually more habitable now than Aerodos is. Aerodos is the new name for Lathe, and we'll see why that is a little bit later. Its atmosphere is obviously a lot thinner, but yeah, since it was originally colder, it's it's actually a little bit more habitable now with the sun heating up. And as I said, we'll find out why a little bit later. So we're just doing a maneuver while we're at our closest approach to Valiant to try and adjust our orbit so we're not going to smash into the atmosphere of Reaper. That would not end particularly well. I'm not going to lie, I did try to see if I could do it. The old cheeky trick where you just dip into the upper atmosphere for a split second with your space probe so you can take scientific readings. I'm not going to say that I didn't try that. It didn't go very well. 10 meters into the atmosphere, the space probe exploded, like instantly. So yeah, no, not going to happen. So what we are going to do is get ourselves on an intercept with Aerodos, the innermost moon of Reaper. Yeah, the moons have moved around a little bit, but I think Lathe was originally, Lathe was always the innermost moon, and it is still the innermost moon. You can see some of the other ones whizzing about there. We don't actually know their exact orbits yet because because of the modern research body. So we have to actually get into their sphere of influence before we get all of their orbital information and the like. But we can still look at them and appreciate them, and look at the beautiful rings of Reaper as well. You can tell that clearly one of the moons smashed into another one because there's a massive debris field, but it really does make orbiting around this gas giant absolutely beautiful. I think it's really cool to see this impression of what all the planets of the Kerbal system would look like 4 billion years on. It really, really is an interesting sort of study. And a lot of people have been asking, like, how is it that it's 4 billion years? Surely Kerbalkind would become like transcendent by that point, with the technology level. I'm just going to say that it's just Kerbalkind in this universe, essentially. Kerbalkind just evolved much, much later on. So Kerbalkind only reached like sentience maybe a couple of 100,000 to maybe 1 million years ago or something like that. So they just evolved much later in this, and then as their world was becoming just about on the verge of becoming uninhabitable, that's when they managed to escape to solitude using very rudimentary rockets. That's what I think anyway, because otherwise it doesn't make much sense, you know, if the original, if Kerbalkind was in the space age 4 billion years ago, or following the timeline of this, apparently they originally evolved on Eve, but whatever. I think it makes much more sense, because think about how fast humanity's advancing, like 4 billion years, yeah, that's I don't think they'd still be using rudimentary space probes like we are. But anyway, you see there we've actually decoupled our rover now, so since I realised that it would be stupid to try and land it on Reaper, it's just going to explode, we're going to try and land this thing on Aerospace. And yeah, as you can see, Lathe has seen better days. You remember this used to be known as the ocean planet? Yeah, now it's got a couple of lakes. That's it. Most of its ocean has literally boiled away. It's got significantly higher gravity than Valiant. It has got a much thicker atmosphere. The atmospheric height is about the same, but this has, I think, about 0.7 atmospheres of pressure, whereas Aerospace, I think, is about 0.2 or something. Something like that, anyway. But yeah, it's a bit of a barren wasteland now. It used to sort of be the Eden, sort of the go-to colonization, you know, sort of effort. You had so many series like where they go and build colonies on Lathe, and like, hey, look, you know, just because it has oxygen in the atmosphere, it's probably breathable. I seem to remember the oxygen atmosphere, even though the atmosphere on Lathe was oxygen, I seem to remember it being toxic. Even though apparently in the new version of KSP we can remove helmets. Apparently you can remove helmets on Lathe, so maybe it isn't toxic, I don't know. But I could have sworn in like some basis there is some basis for me believing that it's toxic. Something to do with the fact that it has liquid water on the surface, even though the surface is colder than freezing. Something to do with salts and stuff, or something to do with the atmospheric composition. I don't know. Anyway, it's probably not a good idea to just take your helmet off on a random alien world and be like, yep, sure, it's got oxygen, it's probably breathable. Anyway, we've managed to land our rover on the surface of Aerospace with absolutely no problems whatsoever. So we just extend our solar panel, get our little camera up. We've launched a lot of these sort of cute little rovers recently. I just really like this part, this Curiosity rover part. It's just really cool. Yeah, what can I say? I just like building rovers. Rovers don't really have much of a purpose, but they're just so much more interesting and so much cooler than just a standard lander. We probably could have brought multiple probes and like landed at least probes on all the moons except Tilos, you know, the new name for Tyler, because of course it has high gravity. We probably could have landed a few atmospheric probes on Aerospace and maybe one on Valm, which is the other moon, if we didn't go to all the effort of bringing a rover. But I don't know, I think it's worth it, and I think we will be almost certainly sending a manned mission here at some point to explore all the different moons, so it doesn't really matter. We're more about the world first here on this mission. We see we did actually break the solar panel there because the gravity is relatively high, so it's quite a struggle to stop the rover just cartwheeling down the hill. But there we go. It's still got 2 backup solar panels, so we're still getting data from it, and it's just going to sit there until maybe it gets visited by Kerbals in the future. However, that gravity assist from Aerospace there has sent us off on a trajectory that will slam us into the surface of Reaper. So yeah, we're going to have to make a little bit of a course correction. We have a lot of Delta V on this spacecraft, and I'm really glad I put as much on here as I did, because we ended up having just enough to explore all the different moons. So I think I judged it relatively well, not going to lie. You see we have sort of one materials bay. I've been looking at USI spreadsheets for far too long. There's a part in USI called the Material Processing Unit. But anyway, we've got enough material bays to basically use one low over Reaper and then low over each of the moons, essentially, because we've got 4. No, we don't have 4. We have 5, I think. Do we have 5 or do we have 4? No, I've forgotten. We have a few. But yeah, we can't take material bay readings over, you know, in every single situation, because we just don't have enough. Don't have enough of them. So we're just going to have to sort of, yeah, ration when we actually use the materials bay for when it will actually get us the most science. And you see we're actually skimming here just over the top of the atmosphere, and we get a very, brief glimpse of the actual surface of Reaper there, which I find quite interesting. But anyway, we're going to have to wait for our next encounter with Valm, which is another one of the moons of Reaper. So in the meantime, it is time for Reclaimer to head home. Yes, finally, our mission to Demise is coming to an end. They should have really gone home one transfer window ago, but they didn't have enough fuel, so we then had to wait for a transfer window to them, and I think that meant we skipped yet another transfer window home. So yeah, then we had to refuel them, and then we landed on the surface again, but that does mean we never have to come back. Like, we literally explored all the biomes and done all the science we can here, so we are never coming back here. Even though we probably could, like, you know, there are still got a few contracts for here that we could grab and stuff. It's such a horrible world. Like, it's got no atmosphere, it's got really high gravity, it's covered in lava, it's difficult to get to. It's just, I hate it. I hate this planet, and we are never coming back. Yeah, I don't think I've ever had such fierce hatred for a planet before. It's just such a pain in the ass to land on a planet with 0.9 Gs of gravity and no atmosphere. But anyway, we're leaving now. As you saw there, we deorbited, well, almost deorbited Monument Lander. We stuck just enough monopropellant to get its periapsis down to about 5 kilometers, so it should smash into a mountain at some point. Try and keep down the space debris. Not that, again, it really matters, because we're never coming back. But yeah, I don't know. It's just being responsible, isn't it? So we're just stepping the time accelerate up to 3 times and then accelerating the video by 8 times so that this burn goes by relatively quickly. And the crew of Reclaimer are on their way home. So back over to Odyssey, which is our mission to the Wasteland. They've got a little bit more time before they head home, but one of the scientists, After Kerbin, has actually become homesick. So now only one of the scientists on that vessel is actually researching the data that we've been getting. But we do manage to transmit enough science to grab ourselves the final tech we need to actually extract resources from the surface of Nemesis, so we can actually begin working on our base on Nemesis and on our off-world rocket production facility. We do actually manage to finish the tier of tech we were on as well, which is pretty nice. Even though some of those techs are completely useless, I do still want to sort of keep to the research, you know, 1 tier at a time, but I just needed that tech. I didn't want to have to wait until I'd researched the entire tier before I could build a base. It was less of a sort of restriction, the whole research 1 tier at a time, and more of just there being so many weird and wonderful techs with all the mods that I'm using. I didn't know which to research, so just confining myself to 1 tier at a time made things easier. But yeah, just beelining for one specific tech because I want to build a colony. I think you guys can understand that. It's fine. I do sort of keep breaking my rules in this series. Like, I started with 60% fun gain and then realised it was just making the game a massive grind, so stepped it back up to 100, and now I've just broken my my very loose research 1 tier of science at a time rule. But you know, whatever. It's all about just having fun, really, in the end, isn't it? Anyway, as you see here, though, we are doing a very quick flyby of Valm, which is the new name for Pol. You see, it's moved orbit a fair bit. It's moved into becoming one of the innermost moons of Reaper instead of being one of the outermost ones, which I do find interesting. Its sphere of influence is absolutely titchy because, of course, it's only a tiny little moon, and now being this close to Reaper, yeah, it really does have a tiny sphere of influence. I am a little irritated at myself I didn't bring some tiny probes. I could have landed something on that, perhaps, you know, a tiny little probe and explored the different biomes because its gravity is so weak. But oh well, that's for the next mission. And as I said, this mission is more about World First. So speaking of World First, we did lose a fair bit of money here because we have the Drizzen probe strategy active right now, which means we get minus 80% to fund gains from all other bodies, but plus 400% to gains from Drizzen. So it is worth it because we're going to get more funds than we'll lose from this, but it's still a little bit annoying. The reason why we're still getting 20% more funds than we would normally be getting from milestones is because we have the other strategy, which is to boldly go, which means we get plus 100% to all milestone gains. So we're losing 80% of that 100%. So we're still getting an extra 20%. But yeah, I did figure out that getting that extra 400% on top of the 100% from to boldly go would certainly be worth it on our Drizzen mission. And you can't change strategies once you have a probe en route to somewhere, you can't then take the strategy for it. So these strategies are sort of long-term things. You have to take the strategy before you launch the mission to somewhere, which is why I didn't take the Eltos probes one as well, because our probe to Eltos, the new name for Elu, is actually going to arrive before our Drizen probe as well, so we'll lose out on some of the milestone gains from that too. But that doesn't mean that we don't get a lot of money from this mission. I think in the end we end up getting about 5 million funds just from World First, because we didn't actually have a single contract for this, which is pretty awesome. But anyway, we have managed to get ourselves a maneuver to get us an encounter with Tilos, the final moon of Reaper, for us to explore. But we'll be doing that in the next episode. And we have a few things to do in the meantime, since we're trying to save fuel here. We're on our last few fumes, so it's going to take a little while before our orbits line up. So thank you for watching, everyone. I've been the Beardy Penguin, and I will see you all next time.